to do if you find bees in your wall? Stay tuned, because we're going to talk about that and more things related to beekeeping on this episode of Pacific Occurrence. Welcome to tonight's episode of Pacific Occurrence. Tonight we're going to talk about beekeeping, how to start a beehive, harvesting for honey, and rescuing bees. Our guest tonight is Farris Hicks from Montera. Farris, you're a new beekeeper, aren't you?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
So tell us how you got into beekeeping.
It started off many years ago as a younger man, something that I've always thought would be fun to do, but didn't have the time or patience at that particular time. Until recently, I've joined a local bee club, the San Mateo Bee Club.
Sounds like just average people can become beekeepers.
There are many people of many different ages, and it's amazing the variety of people that do have them. There are some very experienced people and a lot of newcomers getting into beekeeping, such as myself.
You know, I never realized until I met a few beekeepers how vital bees are to our existence on Earth.
Hi, my name is Russ, local beekeeper. You may have seen me at the Ceremony Farmers Market. So, how many flowers does it take to make 1 pound of honey? A, hundreds, or B, millions? And the answer is B, millions of flowers to make 1 pound of honey. Who are not aggressive and sting only once and then die? Is it A, yellow jackets, which are commonly mistaken for bees, honeybees, or is it B, honeybees? And the answer is B, honeybees sting only once and then die. How many miles do bees fly to make 1 pound of honey? Is it A, thousands, or B, 3.5 times around the Earth? And the answer is B, 3.5 times around the Earth to make 1 pound of honey. Male bees are called A, queens, or B, drones. And the answer is B, drones.
Isn't that an interesting question? So Farris, tell us, how do we start a beehive? What's the first thing you do?
You can purchase bees from a package, or you can go out and try to catch a swarm. The first option is much easier. This is a beginner's box. It's called a little nuke. Right there, I'm emptying the bees into the Langstroth hive. The little can that is set down is full of sugar water. Inside this cage full of bees, there's approximately 3 pounds of bees with a queen inside. Now the queen is inside her own little cage. After we've emptied all the bees into the new hive, we'll place the queen inside the cage for at least 3 days. That way the bees will accept the new queen. You can see I'm placing the extra frames into the hive to give the proper spacing between all the frames, and there you see the picture of the queen in that little cage. I'm giving them a little sugar water there to get things going, a little food for the bees, placing the rest of the frames, and then I put the lid on, and a bag of sugar water or a can of sugar water works great for feeding the bees. The bees will go up, find the nectar, and feed themselves. This helps them build wax and their food supplies to get them up and going till they can go out and forage for themselves. So there is one completed hive. We have a second box that we're about to start here. A little sugar water sprayed on them helps calm them down and it makes them a little bit sticky so they don't crawl out of the box. Bring them down to the edge. We don't want them climbing out before we put them in there, so we bang the box onto the ground and you should see all the bees on the bottom. That's a very important technique, getting your colony started. Now I'm able to lift out the can of sugar water. I set that off to the side, and with your helper or a friend or someone brave enough, you hand the queen over to them.
She is alive. You want to see the queen?
A little douse of sugar water, and there's that beautiful queen hiding in the cage.
Days,
now,
they actually
again,
thought it was a king
we
bee,
don't release her
but it's
until
okay.
approximately 3 days. We're about to, what am I doing there? Oh, we're removing the plug from the end of the queen, and inside we put a marshmallow. Now the other bees can eat through that marshmallow, but it takes approximately 3 days, so it's the perfect tool to use. Now we set that in to the beehive. Notice I have no gloves on. That's something that if you're allergic to bees, you don't want to do that. If you're feeling pretty comfortable, you won't get stung. Bees are very gentle unless you aggravate them or disturb their hive. There's a very important part is oil. We use vegetable oil in the legs so the ants don't crawl up and get into our beehives. And there are 2 completed hives. Typically between 6 to 9 months, and we can produce our own honey.
Thanks, Farris. That was so interesting. Now we're going to have another bee quiz question.
What is the only continent that bees are not found on? Is it A, New Jersey, or B, Antarctica? And the answer is B. Antarctica is the only continent that bees are not found on. How many human food crops depend on bee pollination? Is it A, many, or B, most? And the answer is B, most food crops depend on bee pollination. How many eggs can a queen bee lay in one day? Is it A, hundreds, or B, 1 to 3,000? And the answer is B, 1 to 3,000 eggs per day. What determines the color and flavor of honey? Is it A, seasons, or B, flowers? And the answer is B, flowers.
Isn't that another interesting bee question? So now we have, joining Farris and myself, Russ Morris, who's what he calls a hobbyist beekeeper. Welcome, Russ.
Thank you. Good evening.
So tell us, how did you get into beekeeping? Where are your beehives?
Well, my beehives are in my backyard. I'm a backyard beekeeper. I started beekeeping, I wanted to have a garden. So from my garden, I started composting. And the gardening seemed like a lot of work. So I got into beekeeping, and it was an interesting hobby. I'm in the San Mateo Beekeepers Guild, which is interesting. There's a lot of people that have a lot of knowledge. And just attending the meetings, I got involved in beekeeping. And I have just started selling honey at farmers markets. One of the members started a co-op, and basically the co-op means when we have honey, we can go to a market and sell it, and when we don't have honey, we're off the hook and we don't have to be at the market. So this is my 3rd year of beekeeping, and fortunately, I've been able to accumulate a lot of honey to sell, and when I don't have it, I just get somebody else to take my place at the market.
It's so interesting to me. It's just fascinating that I always considered beekeeping such an exotic, way out there thing, and my neighbors are doing it and people are doing it, and that explanation was very interesting. So how far do the bees fly?
I found that they go at least 4 to 5 miles away from your hive.
I've heard they go 2 miles in each direction. And where I am, there's a lot of eucalyptus that seems to bloom in the winter, that does bloom in the winter time. So that keeps the bees going during the winter. The hive does dwindle down as the seasons, as the year goes on. Like was mentioned earlier, we start with a package of bees, which is 3,000 in April, usually in early spring. And by summertime, June, July, it's gone up to 10 times that amount, to 30,000. And then when it comes into November, we want to reduce our hives to a smaller space because the bees dwindle down in size back again to about 4,000 bees. The queen can live for 2 or 3 years, but the bees will only go for 1 year. But the queen produces so many new bees that the hive just regenerates year after year.
Do bees pollinate or get nectar from flowers and fruit? From everything? From leaves? What are their sources?
Well, your own neighborhood gardens, as Russ mentioned earlier, people's front yards, backyards, the fruit trees that we all have in our neighborhoods, and growers, your farmers that are on the coast side. They depend quite heavily on the local bees to pollinate their crops. The bees are too important of a resource, not only to our local environment, but globally. They're an important resource, so we would like to keep them going as strong and happy as they can be.
Here we have 2 boxes, but often I've seen off the side of the road when I'm driving on Highway 5, they're quite high. What is that?
They're the commercial beekeepers, and they'll move their hives from the orange block, from the almond orchards where they pollinate the almonds early in the year, up to where the orange orchards are to get orange blossom honey. When it gets later in the year during the winter time, they put them close to the highway, they put them to store, and they do feed them the sugar water syrup during the winter. The commercial guys will feed them a lot, so they want to have close access to get to the bees. To supply them with their supply of sugar water to make it through the winter.
Well, now that I've showed you how to set up the hive, I'm going to show you a quick clip of another guild member processing honey.
I became a beekeeper pretty much by accident because my husband gave me some equipment for my birthday. So I started reading some books and I got really, really interested and excited about it, and I joined the Bee Guild, where I met some fellow beekeepers, and from then there was actually no stopping me. Hi, I'm Marianne. I am a hobby beekeeper in Portola Valley, and I have been beekeeping for 3 years, coming up to 4 years, and I'm really enjoying it. Today is the day. The bees are ready. Let me take you up to my hive and show you how to extract honey. I need to smoke the bees with a few puffs, not too much. We're opening the hive and we're looking at the full honey super with the bees running around. As it is full of honey, there are 9 panels in there, all full of honey, capped with honey. So I have to try to move the bees gently aside, pry loose one panel at a time, and lift up the panel, shake off the bees, and put the panel aside until we're done with it. It's really important to quickly close up the hive, otherwise robber bees will come and they will try to rob my bees' honey. So now we're in the garage and we'll be extracting the honey. We have the panels here. As you can see, they are full of honey and they are covered with wax, and the wax will be cut off with the hot knife. Now I'm putting the 4 panels into the extractor, and I close the lid and I'll start spinning. So all we have to do now is open the spigot, and the beautiful honey starts flowing into the bucket. The darker the honey, the better it tastes. If you're interested in keeping bees, I have been doing this for 4 years, and it's really easy to get started. It helps to have some people who give you some help. That's why I joined the Bee Guild. There are bee guilds all over the place. It's really good to have bees in the backyard because they're pollinators and they do something for the environment, so you do something for the environment. And it is a lot of fun, trust me.
Now, Russ, you've brought us some samples of what you typically bring to the farmer's market, what you've gotten from your hive. You've got, is that bee pollen there?
This is bee pollen, and this is my wildflower honey. We call it wildflower because all the flowers are blooming. It's not in an almond orchard or an orange orchard where we would call it orange blossom. It's wildflower honey. It's amazing how much honey you can get out of each hive. There's usually one honey super, maybe sometimes two on a hive, and each super can contain up to 40 pounds of honey.
Oh my goodness.
So it's very possible to get 120, 130 pounds out of one hive per year. You can give it to family and friends, and after a while
sell it.
Or sell it,
yeah,
exactly, or sell it. And here's some of the honey that I have that I sell at the farmer's market. And would you like to sample it?
Oh, I would love to.
Okay,
Thank you.
here, take.
Can't wait. Now, we never refrigerate honey, correct?
No, you don't refrigerate honey, and if it does, it seems that the darker honeys seem to, some people call it crystallize, I don't like to use that word, but it thickens. If it does thicken, the way to thin it out is just put it in your windowsill where sunlight is coming in, and it'll soften up immediately. It'll get, sometimes when I'm at the markets and it's a real hot day, this honey will just flow out. Today it's a little, this evening it's a little cooler, so it comes out the way it probably would in your kitchen. There we go.
Honeys taste different all the time depending on where the bees have been flying around and the flowers and the fruits that they've been taking nectar from.
And if you remember from our trivia question that the honey flavor comes from the different flowers.
Oh,
so
okay.
there's different honey. Now this is the bee pollen, and I'd like to give you a sample of that. See the color? It's all different colors. And there
That's
you go.
considered not a delicacy, but a
Flat hand, so I can just put a little.
And the bee pollen it's not really a snacking. It's more like medicinal for some people, isn't it?
I like to eat it just for the flavor. I like the taste. They do say that it gives you energy. The bee pollen is, if the bees are pollinating plants that you're allergic to, then it's going to build up your immune system to those plants. Now, if you're allergic to grass, green grass, lawns, cats or dogs, I don't know if it would build up your immune system to that, but some people do believe that it helps their allergies with everything.
You could give your cats and dogs the bee pollen. That might help.
Yeah, that would.
So we have to be careful not to store this in the cupboard, correct? You store this under cold?
Yes, it is. I keep it in the freezer. When I take it to the markets, I have my little Playmate freezer box that has an ice pack in it, so I keep it cold.
Can you see this little picture of this bee that we have? It's carrying pollen in between its legs. Often you hear people say, I have bees in my wall, and they want to call an exterminator. And we're here to tell people that really there's people out there that actually come to your home and will safely and gently take the bees out and put them in a safe place. And that's called bee rescuing. And we're going to talk about that in the next segment.
Bees typically will make their combs in rows. They're called palms. So they'll make the rows fairly symmetrical. So you start at the bottom. That's where mostly it's nurse bees. They're not as defensive, and they don't have as strong a sting. So you start at the bottom of the hive and you slowly work your way up. Hi, I'm Art Hall and I rescue bees. Bees moved into our backyard 3 times, and I paid a beekeeper to come and remove them 3 times. And on the 3rd time, the beekeeper said, so you're not afraid of bees, you should become the beekeeper. And I said, Lothar, I don't know how to become a beekeeper. You come with me, I teach you to be the beekeeper. And that's how I got started. And from there, from raising bees in a hive, I found that bees had the propensity to go all of the wrong places. I've removed bees from electric meter boxes, water meter boxes underground, sprinkler boxes. I've removed them from walls, from ceilings, from underhouses, from inside freeway sound walls that are made out of cinder block. I've removed them from behind stucco walls, I cut through 2.5 inches of reinforced concrete to get to one colony of bees and have them removed. I removed them from airports, supermarkets, sporting goods stores, restaurants, just about any place that's warm, dark, and dry. I've removed bees from there. They can go in any hole or any crevice the size of a number 2 pencil. So if you just have a yellow pencil, if you can put it inside the hole, a bee can go in that hole and start a whole colony. I've seen colonies 4 feet by 6 feet, and the only entrance was one small hole. Once you figure out where they are in the wall or the attic or under the house, then you have to figure out how am I going to get there with all my equipment and remove them so that they are removed live and in good shape so that they can reform a colony someplace they should. Now you have to remove the bees without disturbing them. I've designed a special vacuum that will very gently remove the bees from the honeycomb. And you reach up, cut the honeycomb, flip it over in your hand and vacuum the bees from the other side. You now have a piece of comb. The bees are all in a hive. I can take this piece of honeycomb, cut it to exactly the same size as a frame that you use in a beehive. And that evening, I'll take their same eggs, their same larva, pupa, their pollen, everything, and put it back into the hive that they're in.
In the beginning of this year, probably around February or March, I noticed that we were having some bees, but they were not presenting a problem to anybody. The hive started getting bigger, and I thought it was the best thing now to have them professionally extracted. My name is Maurice Hart. I'm a district manager for Frankie Giant and Luigi's. I run 3 of their restaurants here in the North Bay. They did not squawk one bit about me taking care of the bees this way instead of terminating them. They had no problem whatsoever with extracting them this way. This bee population is probably 40 to 50,000 bees. That's a lot of bees. I just didn't want to come in and terminate them, which is by far the easiest thing to do. But when you look at what we need from these bees, by pollination, there was nothing better that I could do than to save the bees.
Now that you understand a little bit more about bees and about removing bees live, and you realize that that's an option, if you or a neighbor, an acquaintance, or a boss ever has a colony of bees, realize that you can give me a call. I can come out and take a look. I focus mostly on San Francisco to Monterey, but I get calls from Sacramento, Los Banos, Napa. You can also go to your local Beekeepers Guild, and they'll have a section for people that collect swarms and people that remove colonies. Don't get out the can of wasp spray. Please, please give somebody a call that can remove the bees live. How you can help with colony collapse disorder is by not killing bees. You know, I'm not talking about the 1 or 2 bees on a flower. If you kill a hive, you've killed 40 to 60,000 bees. So this is a chance for you to make a real difference.
So now you see, we need bees around, and there's many ways. If you find them in your wall or you see a swarm, that there's a safe and gentle and protective way to keep the bees around. Farris is actually going to tell us another way of capturing bees separate from what you just learned. So I'm going to pretend that this is a bee flying around, Farris.
Thank you.
And you're going to show us what you do to capture, what's it called, a swarm?
A swarm, thank you. There are 2 different types of rescues that we do. One are inside structures, such as a home or a barn or some type of structure. The other are called swarms, as you just mentioned, where they actually flying around, land on a tree or a limb. And Russ, if you could hand me that bucket.
We'll pretend this is the bee.
Up in a tree. Now this tool I use for rescuing swarms. It's a homemade piece of material, and what we do is we find a swarm of bees up in a tree, we lift it up, and then I pull the bucket string and snatch them in.
You got it. All right.
Now they're inside, sealed up, I can bring that down. I can actually reach up over 25 feet up into the air and grab them out of a tree limb. And then we put them into the hive from there.
So why do bees swarm anyway?
Russ.
Why do they leave the hive?
Well, it's a natural thing for bees to swarm. They need more space. To keep bees happy, what you want is a dry, safe place for them. If they're bothered by robbers, which could be yellow jackets, then they'll swarm. If they need more space, that's why there's more than one super brood box on the bees. Ants is another reason they would swarm. But the hives split. The queen lays, up to 3,000 eggs a day, and a lot of worker bees, and they get so many they need more space. So beehives die, but they also reproduce. So when they swarm, they're reproducing, and they swarm to go to a place to have more space, and they usually swarm into a tree, and people could get them that way.
Yes, but that's so important to call your local bee guild or a bee professional, because we don't want these swarms going into somebody's neighbor's home where they're going to be a pest or a bother. So if we can put them in the right locations where they're safe, they'll thrive.
I think it's really, really wonderful to know that for our viewers, that there's the Rockaway Farmers Market for those of us in Pacifica. There's local farmers markets in San Mateo County, all over the place, and there's usually always a beekeeper at one of them. And you can buy bee products. The kids love the honey sticks. They love the honey sticks. I've noticed that.
And this is where I was introduced to San Mateo Beekeepers Association, which is the club that we all belong to. We're all members of the San Mateo Beekeepers Guild, to get the information and be around the fellow beekeepers for the knowledge and the expertise in doing it. If you are interested in beekeeping, the first thing that I would do is Google beekeeping. There's a lot of information on the internet. And Google San Mateo Beekeepers Association and attend one of their meetings, which is the first Thursday of every month in Belmont. And you'd be amazed. You might be interested and end up being a backyard beekeeper like we are.
Thanks, Russ. Thanks, Farris, for coming and telling us all about beekeeping and honey. And thanks for tuning in to Pacific Occurrence. You can find us on YouTube, and we know you found this to be a very sweet episode. Good night.